Who's this week's essential ad in fantasy baseball, and who is it time to cut bait on? We'll get to all of that in this week's episode of the Rotoworld Fantasy Baseball Ad Drop. The player I want you to add this week is Houston Astros outfielder Jake Meyers, who's rostered in just 36% of Yahoo leagues. Jake Meyers has continued to play pretty much every day since Chas McCormick came off the IL, so that gives us a really good indication of his job security. When he's on the field, Meyers has been playing really well. He's 25 for 74 in May. That's a 338 average, and his counting stats have really ticked up over the last 2 weeks with 3 home runs, 8 runs, and 9 RBIs over his last 12 games. He makes a lot of contact, is barreling the ball almost 10% of the time, and pulling the ball more than he ever has. That's led to 92nd percentile average exit velocity on fly balls and line drives. And given the Crawford boxes in left field at Houston, that could lead to a surprising amount of power for Jake Meyers this year. Meyers has been a sneaky good fantasy player at times in the past. He did suffer an injury in the outfield and really struggled coming back from that injury, and was really open in the offseason about how recovering from that injury really impacted him mentally, and he wasn't able to kind of get back to the player he thought he was. And that's really kind of improved for the better this year with some offseason mental health stuff that he did. And so I think this is legitimate from Meyers right now. Now, a nearly 15% swinging strike rate will catch up to him a little bit, and so I expect his batting average to settle around 270, but I do think he has 20 homer power and has some chip-in speed while playing regularly in a strong lineup, and I think that makes him worthy of an ad in almost all formats right now. My hold for this week is Minnesota Twins starting pitcher Pablo Lopez. Now, Pablo Lopez is rostered in 96% of Yahoo leagues, so obviously people aren't cutting him. However, a lot of comments on Twitter suggest that people think Pablo Lopez is bad or they're benching him, and so people are clearly fed up with Pablo Lopez. And so I'm putting him in this section this week because I want you to actively go out and try to get him in your fantasy leagues. Let's look at his stats right now. A 117 whip and a 28% strikeout rate are not that different than what he was showing last year. Also, his 5.25 ERA is not supported by underlying metrics since he has a 3.70 expected ERA and a 2.96 SIERA. So what's going on here? For starters, his swinging strike rate is down to 2% from last year, and he's not getting as many chases out of the zone. One component of that is his sweeper, which he's not throwing low in the zone as much as he did last year. He is throwing it belt high almost 28% of the time, and that's led to fewer swings and misses and much harder contact. Still, the pitch grades out really well, and so there's no really concerns with the shape and the movement of it. Pablo Lopez is down 3% on the swinging strike rate on his changeup also, but that has always been his bread and butter pitch. However, he's not throwing the pitch in the strike zone as much this year, and he's not as competitive with it from a location standpoint. Still, it's not being hit hard, and also grades well based on movement. So Lopez's main issues right now are not really about the pitch shape or the movement of any of his pitches. It's really the location of his sweeper and his changeup. We've seen him command the changeup for years, so I'm not really worried about it. And so I'm not overly concerned at all unless we find out that he's battling some injury that's preventing him from getting a feel for those two pitches. I expect a bounce back to be in short order. And remember that Pablo Lopez had a cold stretch for an extended period of time last year and then went on a tremendous run to end the season. So I think we could see that again here in 2024. The player I think you can drop is Toronto Blue Jays infielder Justin Turner, who's still rostered in 58% of Yahoo leagues. We like to think that our ageless wonder hitters will always produce, but time is undefeated. It caught up to Nelson Cruz, and I think it might be catching up to Justin Turner. The veteran was good in Boston last year, but has not looked good in Toronto this year. He's now just 7 for 65 in May. That's a 108 batting average with no home runs, 3 runs, and 6 RBIs in 19 games. He's still making a good amount of contact in the zone and contact overall, but he's swinging more outside of the zone and making more contact outside of the zone, which has led to a lot less damaging and meaningful contact. While he's pulling the ball more this year, he's in a park which is actually worse for right-handed pull power. Obviously, Fenway had the Green Monster, and Turner doesn't have that this year. And so his home run to fly ball rate has taken a big hit this year. At this point, I'm just not really sure what Turner brings to the table in most formats. And I'm not sure we really believe that this Blue Jays offense is the elite offense that we were told it was heading into the year. Vlad Jr. and Bo Bichette are solid hitters. They're struggling a little bit this year. George Springer seems to be on the decline. And so I don't really think this is a deep lineup. And so Turner isn't going to get the counting stat benefits that we thought. So when you add that to his overall struggles, I think you can move on from Turner to pick up a hot bat off the waiver wire. Now, before I get to my stash this week, I want you to pause this video and comment below and let me know any waiver wire questions that you have for this week in fantasy baseball, and I'll answer them as the week goes on. My stash for the week is Baltimore Orioles starting pitcher Cade Povich, who's rostered in 4% of Yahoo leagues. Last week, the Orioles had to put both John Means and Dean Kramer on the IL. And while we don't yet know the timeline on Means, we do know that Kramer is set to start throwing later this week. After his triceps inflammation. However, that doesn't mean a guaranteed return to health. The Orioles have moved both Cole Irvin and Albert Suarez back into the rotation, and while those two have been effective at times this year, a World Series contender is not going to run with Irvin and Suarez in their rotation for a long period of time. While the Orioles could go out and trade for a starter, I think that the improved health of Dean Kramer means that Cade Povich could be an easier answer for them. The 24-year-old has a 2.35 ERA and 10 starts at AAA this year with a 1.06 whip and a 24% strikeout minus walk ratio. That's 71 strikeouts in 53 2/3 innings. He came into this year with the fourth most strikeouts in minor league baseball over the last 2 years, and seemed to be an innings eater with a questionable feel for his command. However, with better command on his fastball this year, the walk rate has gotten better, and it seems like Povich is a less risky prospect as a starter. Now, if Kramer does come back soon, it's less likely that Povich will get the call. But if Kramer has a setback at all, or if Cole Irvin and Suarez really kind of take a step back, then Povich could come up to replace John Means or take John Means' spot in the rotation. So while I don't think this is a slam dunk stash, Povich is really somebody that you want to keep an eye on, because I think if he gets a spot in this rotation, he's a good strikeout arm in a really good team context in a pitcher's park. And so that could be a really solid fantasy ad for us. So as a recap for my moves for this week, I want you to add Houston Astros outfielder Jake Meyers. I want you to look to hold or trade for Minnesota Twins starting pitcher Pablo Lopez. I think it's time to move on from Toronto Blue Jays DH Justin Turner, and I think you can stash Baltimore Orioles starting pitcher Cade Povich in the hopes that he gets a call in the upcoming weeks. We'll be back next week for more Rotoworld Fantasy Baseball ad drops.